Welcome to Barnstable Today. I'm Nick Cortez. Earlier this week, tornadoes carved a path of destruction through nearly 20 communities in parts of western and central Massachusetts. You're not alone if seeing those jarring images of chaos and confusion rekindled memories of Hurricane Bob and the more recent hurricane scares we've had here on the Cape. Watching these scenes unfold to our north and our west makes one wonder how prepared we are as a region to handle a major natural disaster. Well, last year we paid a visit to Barnstable Deputy Police Chief Craig Tamish to find out just that. So today, as our thoughts and prayers continue to be with those who are picking up the pieces, we're bringing you our discussion on hurricane preparedness with Deputy Tamish from July 22nd, 2010. We're here on Barnstable Today now with Deputy Police Chief Craig Tamish. Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Nick. Now,
today we're talking, as I mentioned before, about hurricane preparedness, hurricane safety, and what the town of Barnstable and all of Cape Cod has learned over the years. But it's been about 20 years since we've had a major event happen on Cape Cod. Of course, everyone who was here remembers Hurricane Bob very vividly. You were here for that, Deputy, and I'm wondering if you can kind of recollect for us what you remember about what that time, what that weekend, and then the aftermath was like.
Well, the big thing about Hurricane Bob was the loss of power, the number of downed trees that we had, and the inability of people to, A, get around, and B, to be able to go out, get food, get fuel for a number of days. There were significant power problems, and that obviously impacted how people were able to respond. One of the good things was that the hurricane occurred during the summer, as most of them obviously do. Mm-hmm. Our biggest fear, and from an emergency preparedness standpoint, are the winter storms, because those are much more intensive as far as the sheltering needs.
Sure.
Most people were able to stay in their house for Bob, and some of the other minor hurricanes that we have had. But the response for Bob, from our perspective, was really on the DPW, because we did not have to do a lot of sheltering.
In the past 20 years, here in the town of Barnstable and on Cape Cod, obviously we've seen plenty of storms of varying degrees, but the major storm, I think, maybe that has defined that period of time would be Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans, obviously, and the surrounding Gulf Coast areas. There's much to be learned from that. How can we take those lessons and apply them here in case something happens again?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I think has been learned from Hurricane Katrina is that the town, the state, the federal government cannot respond on a large scale very quickly. So the whole focus of emergency management and emergency planning has shifted, in that we are trying to encourage people to become much more self-reliant, to be able to, for the first 3 to 5 days, take care of themselves, because it takes that long to ramp up emergency response.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that then. In the unlikely event, but certainly the possible event that a hurricane would end up striking Cape Cod again, what would you recommend that people have on hand? What types of plans would you hope that they would have, and so on?
Well, there's actually a very good website on that. The Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. If people go to mass.gov and then go to the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, they have a section on hurricane preparedness tips. Mm-hmm. And what they advise is that you have a supply kit of your own. Things such as canned meats, fruits and vegetables, dried fruits, coffee, tea, bottled water. You know, they recommend 1 gallon per person per day. Just the common sense type of things. Make sure you have sufficient medications. I mean, a lot of people might wait until their prescriptions are ready to run out before they, normally renew them. Well, if there's a storm coming, make sure you have sufficient medications, because that pharmacy may not be available to you.
Now, let's suppose that the worst case scenario does happen,
yep,
and maybe you do have provisions, but you don't have electricity. Let's say a winter storm occurs, and you don't have heat. Obviously, a sheltering system is in place across Cape Cod. Tell us a little bit about that, where people could seek refuge.
There is a sheltering system in place on the Cape. In fact, that is in the process of evolving also. Historically, each town has provided their own shelters. Here in Barnstable, we had 2 shelters. I think there were a total of 24 shelters across the Cape. It became very evident as time has gone on that the agencies such as the American Red Cross that are charged with running these shelters were not going to be able to set up and run 24 shelters. They just did not have the manpower available. So what has been evolving over the past about 4 years is a regional sheltering system. Prior to the regional shelters, Barnstable had sufficient supplies for approximately 50 people. Now, 50 people with a population of 50,000 that may go to 100, 120, depending on which number you read, 1,000 people in the summer, obviously is not sufficient.
Yeah.
So what we have tried to do, and the local emergency planning committee has been very active in this, is obtaining funding through some grants, through the Homeland Security regional setup, and through some private grants that the Red Cross has obtained. And currently in Barnstable, we have sufficient supplies for 500 people, so we've tenfold. The goal is that each of the 6 regional shelters will have supplies and facilities available for 1,000 people. You cannot plan to shelter 50,000 people. You can't plan Cape-wide to shelter 220,000 people. It just will not. You could never afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we think that the 1,000 people, which would be 6,000 people for the 6 shelters across the Cape, is a reasonable number that will work.
And in the town of Barnstable, the regional shelter would be at Barnstable High School.
Correct. It's at Barnstable High School.
Now, with all this said, with all this advice and information given, in your opinion, how ready is the Cape to handle something like this if it were to happen again?
I think the Cape is much more ready than they were 5 years ago. Is there still a lot of work to be done? Absolutely. But we have been working, we meet monthly through the Regional Emergency Planning Committee, and there's a subcommittee on sheltering that we're also on, mm-hmm. and we meet monthly and are moving along fairly well into doing this. But the public has a role in this also. The public has to, as I mentioned, one is be prepared to fend for themselves mm-hmm. for anywhere from 3 to 5 days.
Yep.
The second thing is the public has to be aware of what is going on as far as, say, an impending ice storm or an impending hurricane. And they have to, if an evacuation order, for example, is given, they have to have a place to go. If they want to go to the shelter, that's great. We will be happy to take them. But people have to remember the shelter is a rather Spartan environment to be in.
Of course, yeah.
It's not exactly comfortable. So if people can go to a friend's house, say out of a danger area, or go off Cape, which is a whole nother issue, as you know, the Cape Cod traffic plan.
Absolutely.
Trying to get...
It's a whole different show.
It's a whole different show. And a lot of people don't realize that in the case of a hurricane, that if once the winds reach 70 miles an hour, the 2 bridges, the Sagamore and Bourne Bridge, are shut down by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Exactly.
So there will be no evacuation.
If you'd like even more information on how to be prepared in the event of any number of natural disasters here on Cape Cod, download the Cape Cod Emergency Preparedness Handbook at www.capecodcommission.org/emergency prep handbook. Well, that's all for now. Everybody have a good weekend. I'm Nick Cortez, and we'll see you next time on Barnstable Today.